In my experience, the industry has evolved over the last several years. Depending on the country and the country's strategy for their defense industry, there is a variation in the spectrum of outsourcing and inclusiveness from a global perspective. I think the broad trend, though, is globalization, where the industry has realized that very little of the overall platform is actually sensitive in terms of national security, and majority of the platform or the service being provided can actually be collaborated with other countries, other industries, where the niche is and where, frankly, it's more cost effective. There was a time when any export of defense products, for example, in the United States, would be an exception to the rule. And now more and more one sees, not only with the NATO countries, but with other countries around the world, there is an increasing tolerance and increasing adaptation of the export control regime in order to allow export and sale and co-production of some of the platforms in countries abroad. I think the corporate boardrooms obviously are looking for growth and profit for their company. And there are countries out there that have rich defense budgets and a big need to step up their military from a modernization perspective. So clearly there are countries in the Middle East, in Asia, that certainly need more hardware, more services, and companies in the United States are focusing on those countries. Simply from a corporate standpoint, to engage with them. The difference, however, is that now it's no longer simply a buying-selling relationship these countries that are buying want. It's more of a partnership that they want. And so in that partnership, they want a piece of the action, so to speak, in terms of manufacturing some of parts and components of the platform and of the services, or they want some sort of training programs. And so increasingly, it makes more sense for companies to actually form local entities, either through a joint venture or through a local subcontracting relationship, and effectively using the richness of that particular country, whether it's in terms of resources, raw materials, labor, etc., to actually feed into the overall global business model. And so you'll find that increasingly countries, for example, like India, are providing a lot of rich technical labor, are providing the land and the environment for defense manufacturers to go in and have a partnership rather than just a buying-selling relationship. Russia, Israel, these are countries that have a large export market, increasingly China, that are exporting. At the same time that the U.S. is, of course, from an export standpoint, a dominant player too. And again, geopolitics is always a factor when one looks at the export market. Individual countries have different neighborhoods and different challenges and threats that they perceive. And so, as I mentioned earlier, there are some countries that are in very difficult neighborhoods, and they do need a lot of imports of weapons and ammunition. And then there are other countries that simply don't have that kind of threat. However, most countries, I would say, are seeing that their internal security needs is becoming a larger and larger component of their overall security. So axisymmetric threats, terrorist threats, local uprisings from within the country form the threat matrix more so than, the traditional invasions of other countries into their territory. I think it's a critical role. I think as we talk about different countries trying to come up in their capabilities in defense and aerospace. I think innovation and R&D spend is going to be the two critical factors that will make or break their case, frankly, because when we talk about labor and the cost of labor, and we talk about other things that may attract to do manufacturing work in some countries, well, very soon you have other countries that can provide a more competitive labor rate, etc. But what is critical is for the countries to create their own innovation capability and R&D capability, because in the end, that is what will sustain the industry for the long term. And I think that's how the United States has been a dominant player, is with the percentage that goes into R&D spend for the products and services that the United States does. I don't think there's any other country that does that.